Relearning to Play, a personal teaching and performance philosophy statement with Joe Garza.
Hi. So first of all, can y'all see and hear me? Yeah, that's thumbs up. Excellent. So hi, my name is Joe Garza. Welcome to my studio apartment. Um, this entire semester, I've been doing research on writing teaching philosophy statements and their importance in education. And my main argument for my capstone paper is an argument for a more professionalization of educators, both in um, elementary, middle school, high school, and university, um, to sort of raise the standard for teachers across the United States. And I use sort of teaching philosophies as my vehicle to sort of make that argument. But as part of researching teaching philosophies, a mission I set out for myself was to develop one of my own. And so I have with me my personal teaching philosophy statement that I wrote out, and I'm going to be sharing with you all now. Ever since I was little, I always had an interest in performing arts. It originally manifested itself in a want to become a film director, then gradually evolved and expanded into becoming a holistic theater artist. Originally, I wanted to fully immerse myself in the world of theater and study to become a working artist or technician in university. However, after taking a child development class my junior year of high school, it became apparent that teaching was a profession I should set my eyes on. I always had a knack for working with people who were younger than me, even when attending to my younger cousins. Oh, younger than me, even when I was younger myself. And my family reinforced this idea with shorthand praises when attending to my younger cousins. Originally, the decision to go into teaching was driven by a hunch that it'd be a good fit for me, but I never considered why. In my time further studying both education and theater, the layers behind that hunch began to unwrap themselves. The disciplines of both education and theater intersect in many unexpected ways. The more I learned about these intersections, the more these layers would unwrap. The most important intersection I found is the affect of, when learning, what's more important is the process of discovery and not the end product. Being an art, the process of theater making cements itself in the active engagement of the imagination. In every step of the process, be it as a designer, or performer, or director, creativity branches itself into many different paths, and discovering which one is the one you want takes a lot of trial and error. One of my goals as a teacher is to encourage this line of thinking to my students, a way of thinking that doesn't center itself around the end product, but instead the process of getting there. What are all the different avenues we can take to realize the ideas in our heads? What is it like to enjoy the journey? What does it mean to fully embrace the creative process? I find that in a lot of core classes, the end product is what's at stake. Be it through testing, or a project, or even basic assessment. Students worry more about doing good rather than actively engaging in the process where learning happens. Though it may seem like common sense, a lot of students don't know how to enjoy the discovery of the branches. Learning here takes place in the enjoyment of what you're doing. Because what's the point of creating something if you didn't enjoy making it? This way of thinking is heavily informed by my time as a student of theater and education. Early on to my college education, I was fixated on grades. Having, quote, underperformed in my high school years, I came into the university with lofty expectations of perfect grades. While on the surface, having these expectations for oneself doesn't seem problematic, I think I was purposefully blindsiding myself to where my true potential lied in. I struggled to meet my expectations and couldn't understand why. Hold on. It wasn't until I embarked on this journey to discover my teaching philosophy that my frustrations with my academics were put into perspective. As part of this exercise, I combed through my old works to reflect on my writings. What I found was a myriad of essays, art projects, and lesson plans, Interweaved in this body of work was all of the hours of work I had put into each project. And that's when it hit me that the importance of my educational journey wasn't the letter at the end of the semester, but instead the substance of what I was doing. This substance realized itself in all of the hours of thinking, exploring, producing, creating, writing, performing, and failing that took place in my time learning. This experience of valuing the process, admiring the work created, and reflecting on the missteps along the way is one I want to pass on to future generations. Up until this moment of catharsis, I think I was primed to believe that my value as a learner came from a letter or a number assessing me, rather than the quality of the things I produced and the value of producing them. Sounds rich coming from someone who's studying the craft of teaching learning, that I had been blindsided like that. But I guess that's what years of pursuing constructed value brackets will do to you. So, how does an amorphous approach to teaching translate into the classroom practically? For me, it's all about creating an atmosphere and culture of play as a means of learning. Play is a multifaceted process that requires people to open up, actively engage their cognitive functions, and be present with others in the room. It posits exploration and fun on the same dimension. This is important because by using play-based methods, I follow up on my pillar of prioritizing the process rather than the end product. Pedagogically speaking, play offers a classroom approach that makes use of games, exploration, interactivity, and reflectiveness. Games in particular ring together these principles together. On a fundamental level, games are problems that must be solved. However, what makes them different from puzzles or challenges is that they require more than one person to play. By virtue, games necessitate teamwork in order for a group to achieve a common goal. Furthermore, the way to reach the goal of any game differentiates between each play session. The fluidity of problem solving here is central to what I believe as a teacher. So, facilitated through games, I firmly believe that learning cannot happen without the student being engaged in an active state of play throughout the learning process. This means wanting to participate in class, exploring their curiosities about the subject, and doing so with an intrinsic enthusiasm. It's also possible to ignore the fact that games are fun, and young people in particular, looking for a break from the monotony of class, want to play games. And what's life without a little bit of fun? Because if it's not fun, then what's the point? It's funny. Anytime I tell someone that I'm looking to teach middle school kids in particular, people always say stuff like, "Wow, you're so brave," or "Good luck," as if middle schoolers are some malicious force that can't be controlled and I'm the knight in shining armor that will tame them. Middle schoolers present a particular set of challenges, as with any age group, but I think there's a notion that they're rebellious and mean for the sake of it, which I just can't agree with. Middle school is such a sensitive period of time for many people. The sensitivity exists on two planes, really. Sensitivity to one's own identity, and sensitive to the external world that seeks to crack one's sense of self. In other words, a lot of the stigma surrounding this age range, in my belief, comes from a heavily misplaced frustration with the types of challenges middle school students are facing at the time. In a lot of ways, they're, quote, being rebellious, is a form of identity seeking, a self-sustained validation hampered by a misguided teacher. Which brings us to the theater arts. In a state of a transition where identity is liquid, theater arts gives these students the freedom to explore who they are in a safe and expressive manner. Every student has an individual voice, and it would be a waste of my time, and by extension their time, if I didn't give them access to that voice. I want to offer my students access to the safe environment provided by play spaces, where they are free to explore their identities through the arts. In my classroom, every type of theater artist has a place for them: performer, designer, director, technician, or manager. And if there isn't a place for them, I want to help them find it. It's my mission to ensure that all voices are heard. More importantly, that I give them access to have their voices be heard. When I say I want to give students access to their voice, it comes from a very powerful experience I had as a teacher. In the summer of 2019, I worked at the Palace Theater Summer Camp as a company manager. In many ways, I took the position of a homeroom teacher, wherein I was with my group of students all day and managed them around from class to class. We even had our own special class called Company Time. It was my second session, and I was working with 5th through 6th graders. There were lots of bright and beautiful students eager to participate in our activities. I very distinctly remember a student who wanted to participate but was hesitant to. They would raise their hand halfway. However, if you called on them, their hand would shoot up and they'd be ecstatic to participate. I noticed the student would become frustrated if they had their opportunity to participate stepped over by someone who was, quote, better. I kept observing them and would give them small acknowledgements of their presence whenever they weren't called on or had someone, quote, better take the spotlight. With all this said, my most powerful experience with the student came after camp while I was waiting for their parents to pick them up. They had taken a liking to me and asked me to sit next to them for a little bit. I agreed, of course. I remember they had an eager expression on their face, almost as if they were containing some happy secret. When I sat next to them, they said, "Do you want to listen to me sing Under the Sea?" This came as a happy surprise to me, given their half-committal approach to sharing their talents. However, as they were getting ready to sing, some other students from the class, those perceived to be better, must have overheard them say Under the Sea and started singing. I noticed the student who called me over completely shut down. They went from an open expression in their body and happy smiles to crossed arms, head down, and a face that repelled me. I could tell that the other student's singing was bothering them. With a gentle approach, I simply asked, "What's wrong? You were so excited to share your singing with me earlier." They poked their head up and gestured it to the students up top. I could tell they were feeling inferior at this moment. This gave me an opportunity to give them access to that voice they closed off to me. I asked again what was wrong, and under their breath, I just heard, "You already heard them sing it, so why would you want to hear me sing it? You're so much better than I am." I leaned in close and said, "So, I think they have lovely voices, and I'm happy to have heard them singing. But they're not you. Whether or not they are better than you is irrelevant to me. You called me over because you wanted me to hear you sing, right? And so here I am, sitting next to you, and I still haven't heard you sing. I want to hear what your individual Under the Sea sounds like, because there's no other like it if it's yours." It took some more prodding with words like these, but eventually they turned to look at me, head still down, and a bit of a quivered lip. They smiled and began singing Under the Sea. I praised her for sharing their voice with me, and we decompressed a little bit afterward. In this instance, it was clear to me that they had a beautiful talent to share, but without me working to get that voice out of them when they felt inferior, they would have never shared. Much like Ariel, this is a situation where a talented student lost access to their beautiful voice, and I had to create the space for them to find it again. You know, as I sit here, thinking about how to end this statement, I'm left kind of stumped, because there's just so much more I want to say. I made a little list of core values for myself in preparation for writing this, and in turn, presenting this. And while I've hit on the pillars of teaching I believe in the most, I haven't hit all of them. So why don't I just write them down? Tell more stories about my time as a student, or a counselor, or a friend, or a teacher. Well, This might be antithetical to all of the research I've been doing, but I want to end on an open note. A note that I hope is familiar to me for the rest of my life. The note that plays the beautiful strings of discovery. One where an answer doesn't exist, but instead a journey, instead mystery and curiosity, and a bravery to explore them. A note that I can hopefully play with my students in the future. One where teacher and learner work together to enrich their lives with the fruits of their selves. Um, so yeah, that's my statement. I don't know if we're taking questions now or reactions. um,
I think the first reaction should be a round of applause. That was a beautiful, I mean, that was a wonderful presentation. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
I'll open the floor to people. I see Jacob Fly has their hand up.
Yes, I have a brief question. I was wondering if this sort of education can be equally likely, just based on your experiences that you've shared, to adults, and perhaps even at a lower price, since adults require less supervision and maintenance to meet their needs.
So you can you repeat part of that question? You cut out at the second half of it, so I wasn't quite able to catch it.
Yes, of course. Can this sort of education that you've outlined be made available to adults, and perhaps even at a lower cost?
I don't know about cost. I'm not that person. But yeah, 1,000,000%. It could be used with adults, right? It's the idea of creating play spaces. So it's this want to engage in the process, right? Because if you sort of set your sights if you have very narrow sights, because I'm going to get this done, I'm going to get this done, right? And you're not enjoying the process and you're not engaging with like what you're making, chances are it's not going to stick with you, right? And chances are whatever value comes out of that isn't going to be as rewarding. So yeah, absolutely, 110%, right? And
Cool.
I know there's other professors in here. You know, I hope my words have encouraged some thought in how you approach classes in the future. But yeah, that's my answer. 110%. Yes, yes.
So does that mean there's also room for growth in terms of like introducing new people to the activity?
Yeah. What's great about it is growth is ever present, right? There's no end, and it's not a ladder that you have to climb. It's more so almost like a roller coaster that goes up and down and twists and it turns, right? Because I think observing growth as this, and then I'm on this step, and then I'm on this step, and then I'm on this step. And if you sort of set this sort of free bound kind of idea in a way that there's like an end goal or there's no end goal, I think that the process of climbing that ladder becomes so tiresome because you're like, when am I going to get off this ladder? I keep going up and up and up, but where does it? There's no end, right? So I think it's more so about seeing growth as a multifaceted thing that expands, right, rather than growing up. So yeah, it's limitless growth in a way.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. I don't know if we have other hands. I'm in speaker view and I can't see any hands.
No other hands at the moment, but please feel free to just unmute yourself to ask a question or share a comment. I can say as a former teacher who has written a teaching philosophy that I was particularly moved by your presentation, Joe. I felt that your personal anecdotes were extremely moving, and that's why couldn't even articulate at the very end what I wanted to say. But it was a great presentation, and I really appreciated you sharing it.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the space to share it, right? It's just been a very personal and vulnerable journey to write this. So obviously presenting it, it's like a whole other thing. But yeah, and thank you all for like listening and being here. I see Joan Parks has I saw your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yes, and I've been listening very closely to your remarks because I now have a grown daughter that's 25, and lots of challenges through the traditional school systems for sure. As you continue on this journey, will you be I liked your philosophy, and I think that a lot of private schools and other schools outside of the traditional schools are exploring this. Have you visited other schools like Montessori schools or the Goddard schools? We see different schools popping up even here in Georgetown now that weren't available 25 years ago. And have you explored their philosophies and how they dovetail into your own philosophies, or would you see them very different?
So I haven't gone and visited them. I know about them, and I haven't gone out like when I go like job hunting and looking for those personal statements on like their websites about like our values and things like that. I think it would be interesting to go into one, but part of my mission is to go to public schools and make sort of myself accessible to as many people as possible.
Right.
Especially because I'm an arts teacher, so I'm not bound to No Child Left Behind stuff. And so I think it's just a perfect opportunity for me to, particularly with those middle schoolers who are having a lot of issues finding who they are or what they want to do, or even feeling valued in their own bodies. I think it just gives me the largest reach to enter public school. It would be an interesting option to look at for sure, but it's where I'm standing right now. I know I want to be in public school.
Well, and I applaud you for, staying with the tradition or the public school systems. I know that these schools are expensive, and they're reaching a selected population. So yes, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Joe? Well, we want to thank all of you for joining us today for the Research and Creative Works live presentations, and a big thank you to all of our presenters as well for sharing their work.